Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Mrs. Shoda's 5th period news broadcast. Today is Monday, June 11th. Typically, kids start school around the age of 5 and then graduate high school at age 18. Students will spend 13 years total from elementary school to middle school and then finally on to high school. Depending on the district, the number of years you spend in each school varies. Currently in America, it has been said that schools are failing, and this could be for a variety of reasons. In our news segment today, we're going to address some of the main issues that lead to America's failing schools and what is occurring within each issue. We are going to talk to some special guests to hear about the problems and their thoughts on what can be done to fix the issue. Stay tuned for Pegasus Smith out in the field for more on it.
Thank you, Doris. I'm out here today in this hurricane-like weather to introduce some specialists in the field and the topic of failing schools in America.
According to the National Center for Education Statistics, in the 2013-2014 school year, the total expenditures for public elementary and secondary schools in the United States was $634 billion. The Census Bureau calculated that nationally the most recent data indicates that $11,762 is spent on public education per student. This doesn't take into consideration that this number varies per state. Factors that change the amount of money in each state is the living conditions, class sizes, and also the demographics of those areas. In public schools, about half of the funding comes from taxes. This creates differences in funding of schools that are in wealthy communities when compared to communities impoverished. There have been efforts to try and reduce the differences in funding. It has been said that through research, expenditures didn't relate to student achievement. But controversially, it has been said that resources schools have available are related to student achievement and important. These resources can only be gained through funding. Funding of public schools is from federal, state, and local, but the large amount is from property taxes. Because of this large difference between states and also between districts, this is why on the issue of funding for American schools, my opinion is to create a minimum amount of money per student in the public school system. This number should be decided upon by the United States government, but it is my opinion that the number be $10,000 or greater. This number can be increased in areas that are wealthier from their taxes, but this number should never be less, no matter how impoverished a community is. I think that with fair funding throughout all public schools in America, it will increase the America school system. With more funding, it will give schools in poorer neighborhoods more money to put into the schools, which will give students more opportunities. A better education experience with many learning opportunities will make the students more engaged. When you know that the government cares about your education and when your school is nicer and you have more chances at success, it will increase student morale and successes. There has been success in more funding. In the McCleary decision, the Supreme Court ruled that the legislature had failed to fulfill its constitutional obligation to our state's 1.1 million students. Years later, the court found the legislature had failed to provide a plan for funding and the state was fined. The victory at McCleary provided Washington with billions of funding for K-12 public schools. Recently, the 2018 legislature approved another $1 billion for K-12 educator compensation as ordered by the Supreme Court in November. Washington State had been not properly funding public schools, so it's of great concern that this issue is occurring elsewhere. There needs to be intervention in cases that bring light to the unfairness of schools in areas of great poverty. Every child deserves an education, and increasing the amount of money that goes into it is worth it. My proposal on how to fix this issue is that the same amount of money is given per student no matter their living condition, so every student has an equal chance. Thank you.
Thank you. And now on to Leonard Skinner with this continuing report.
Thanks, Pegasus. Well, before I introduce some of my findings, we first must understand what defines a failing school. Consistently low test scores on standardized testing and low academic achievement are the two factors that tell us the success rate of a school. First, I will be sharing some of my research on the problems of overcrowding in Washington schools. In a day and age where teachers are becoming more important, the population increase, overpopulation is becoming more of a pressing issue. Recently, a study by a school in Tennessee randomly assigned students and teachers to a class of either 15 or 22 students, and the results weren't too shocking. The results showed that students who were in the smaller class experienced higher academic levels of success for the next 3 years, and overall had higher test scores on standardized testing. From these results, we can see that teachers work more efficiently with smaller classrooms, and by creating one-on-one time creates a more engaging learning experience for both the teacher and the student. The next problem with failing schools I've been researching is how wages affect teachers and students. For the past 30 years, teachers' salaries have been declining. In fact, teachers make 14% less than other professionals with similar educations. This creates an incentive for teachers to not put forth the same type of effort they would if they were getting paid like maybe more. Another downside of these low wages is a lack of influence to be a teacher. In many circumstances, people go into a field mainly due to how much the job pays. If being a teacher doesn't pay as well as some would hope, it might create a shortage of teachers in the future, and might create a higher student to teacher ratio. But these problems are fixable. Many people have considered using a portion of the $319 million we make from medical marijuana and use it to help fund education. Another solution proposed is maybe increasing the price of lottery tickets or using a larger percentage of the fundings we make to help schools in more need. I think these two ideas would be great solutions, and I guess we can only see what the future holds.
Once again, thank you. And now we're on to share with this continuing report.
Thanks, Pegasus. Racism is a major issue in today's schools, and I believe that the answer to America's failing schools is that kids aren't getting the same level of education at every school in each state. Now, I understand that most schools have different goals they try to achieve with their students, whether that be sports or a specific subject they exceed at teaching or are best known for. But every student needs an equal opportunity to learn, and that can't happen when we have schools located in different areas ranging from lower class to higher class, and teachers getting paid different amounts. According to a graph from U.S. News in 2013, the educational attainment in the U.S. by race is 8 whites with less than a high school diploma and 16 blacks with less than a high school diploma. The number of black people in residential custody from 2011 is at 900,000, and where the rate for white people is at about 200,000. This data proves that racism is still a major issue in America, and the fact that it's affecting their level of education is unacceptable. More than 2 million black students attend schools where 90% of the student body is made up of minority students. On average, schools serving more minority populations have less experienced, lower paid teachers who are less likely to be certified.
Oh, didn't see you there. Thank you. And once again, we're going to go to Daquavius for this continuing report.
Thank you, Pegasus. The continuation of preparing the nation's youth for the next stage in life is of utmost importance, not only because they're being educated in schools, but because they're being prepared to contribute to the economy in whatever way they desire. The OECD is a national supervisor of the nation's educational performance, and they put out tests that find results that best represent the future economic health of a nation based on academic achievement. If they are self-driven and excel in school, the sense of desire to succeed is a common feeling. But if a student is surrounded by failure and confusion, chances are they will end up doubting themselves, give up, and set the bar low. Many states have seen an increase in spending in terms of education, but this doesn't mean that it will improve results, and it hasn't. The marginal cost in this case is outweighing the benefit because millions of dollars is being spent on education, and that number increases every year, but there's no sign of improvement. The United States is far behind in terms of education and performance compared to countries like China, Poland, and South Korea. This lack of improvement causes people to think that schools can make little to no difference in terms of a student's education, and this results in the problem seeming as if it is unsolvable. Statistics shown by the ACT organization shows that around 76% of our nation's high school graduates were not adequately prepared for the first year college courses. This statistic alone tells us that our nation's schools are not doing one of the most important jobs and parts about going to high school. There are many probable causes to why kids are failing in schools, but one of them is reoccurring in my studies, and the issue of having socioeconomic problems. This is an unsettling fact that disadvantaged students, meaning that they come from a poor family or their family speaks another language or anything along those terms, are underperforming in schools. Also, a study from 2 doctors that have affiliations with the New York Times shows that a gap between the educational performance of rich and poor students continues to increase as students progress through the public school system. 2 very important problems along with socioeconomic problems that I found in my studies is that students that have families plagued by low income and/or language barriers have shown to perform poorly in schools. Another thing that I found is that low income areas don't have the ability to present proper learning opportunities for students, meaning students looking for chances to excel in stronger classes like AP don't have the chance to because schools have a one-size-fits-all mindset. This goes the same for students with learning disabilities or issues. Similarly, teachers do not have room for growth because of the same mindset implemented by schools.
Thank you for all your insight. Now we're going to go back to the desk with Doris.
Thank you, Pegasus, for those interesting findings. Thank you for tuning in to Mrs. Shoda's 5th period news broadcast, and we will see you tomorrow.